Okay, we're going to start by putting down our first wash. You can see we've got our outline here, just a very loose outline. It's almost better to do these kind of paintings without any drawing or whichever. However, that takes some practice because there's certain things that are important you get in the right space. For example, like the eyeball, the beak, things like that. The rest of it we're going to keep very simple and very loose. So, let's take a look. What will our first wash be? If we look at our painting, our lightest value that shows up kind of underneath the feathers is this bluey gray kind of color. It's very light. So maybe got a value of about a 2 or so, like that, if we were to compare it on a value scale. So we're going to do a very loose wash of the back half of the bird and the head with that color. Okay, so we're going to do it all in one go. We're going to use a fair bit of water, and then we're going to let it dry. The brush I'm using is a squirrel hair brush. This is made by Da Vinci. It's supposed to be the brush that Leonardo da Vinci used. Who knows? So the first thing I need to do is get some water on my brush, get a nice shape on it there. You can see I've got a nice point. So why use a brush like this? Well, one, it holds a lot of water, a lot of pigment. So when you're doing a painting like this in this kind of style, it's kind of an ideal brush to use, like a quill brush or a calligraphy brush. So I think the color that I'm going to use, I'm not so worried about matching the color exactly. I just want the right value and close enough. So I'm going to use Payne's Gray, which I just kind of am mixing up on here. So I'm very loose with my brush strokes. Try not to worry so much about the lines, like staying in the lines, okay? Like, I mean, you obviously don't want to be making a big point on the head or whichever, but keep it loose and keep it simple. That's the key. If you want to loosen up your paintings, you got to be loose. So there, I went up a bit high on the head. I'm not going to worry about it or stress about it. Ideally, I wouldn't have done that, but whatever. It's all good. A bit more paint there. And you want to make sure that, you know, if you want areas that are light, leave them light, but try to avoid getting these any hard lines or anything in there. Now, I'm getting a bit more of our bird there. Oh, that was, see, this area here I think is too dark because we've got a lighter area there. So I'm going to try and pick some of them up. So to do that, I'm going to use my brush as a mop. And I'm just going to come in here and basically take all the water out and just let whatever's there stain it. And take out those lines. I don't want hard lines there. There is some kind of white feathery action going on there. A little bit more up there. Excellent. All right. And what else we got going on here? Where is this color coming? It's coming up here, blending in with the orange. I'm going to put in a bit more water there to break this shape up. Now, I didn't have to come all the way back here. I could have just done that with my other color, but for now I just want to make an outline just so that you can see the shape that we're doing, okay? So we could have done just this little section of the bluish gray color and then moved on to the other section and then broke it up into different parts. However, now we're going to try and be blending all those together. We want to keep it nice and simple. So because the color going over top is a darker value, it shouldn't really make that much of a difference, okay? Okay, so we can see here how our paint is dried. We've got this great little shape on there. Now, if you were worried about where everything was on your painting and you erased some of your lines, you know, you can take your pencil if you want. Ideally, you want to use a water-soluble pencil. This is just pick this one up. It's a 6B. You could use a lighter one. I'll use an HB for this. Just marks aren't as dark. Just giving yourself an idea of where did everything go? Where does that tail come out of? Where does this come from? Try to keep this to a minimum. Don't worry about it so much. You know, if the bird were to change its shape or its direction, all these would change anyways. So in a way, you can kind of say, like, you know, these shapes and lines and whatnot are really defined by how the bird is sitting, how the light falls on. So really, this is how we see it in the photograph. That doesn't mean that's the only way that bird will look. These things move around so much, so fast, that everything changes anyways. So don't worry at this stage about exactly where everything is. If you want to give yourself a rough outline like that, that's fine. But honestly, the more loose and free you are with it, and understand how it works, how the paint's going to dry, that's the key, is knowing how it's going to dry so that you can put it on and then let it dry. So we're going to move on now to, we're going to do our brown layer. We're going to try to keep this as few layers as possible. So what the color is, the browny, kind of goldy, yellowy color, I'm going to take a crack at this, and I'm going to use a natural sienna, raw sienna. You can use yellow ochre if you want. I'm going to grab some sepia. Yeah, sepia is what we want there, I think. So again, I'm going to start very loose. Because I made this lump up here in my head, I'm going to bring it up a bit higher up here. Okay, so I'm just going to come around. I'm going to start with the dark area. There. Keep that shape as much as possible. And go from there. Now we've got some yellow in the middle here. I want to do this kind of quick so you get it before it dries. It's already starting to dry on me here. We'll let that sit like that for now. Now we'll grab some of this color. We'll come down here. That was the first color that we mixed up. It's a bit darker around the edges. We can add in some more sepia on our brush over here for this part along the edge. There. Again, down here it's darker. We'll use that down here. Now we're going to get lots of water, lots of paint before it dries. Now I'm going to use the tip of my brush, and I'm going to flick these up. Oops. Very little pressure there. So what I'm trying to do is make the shape of the blue fur on the top there blend in a little bit better. Now this line here, we need to fix that, but we'll do that after, once it's dried a bit. But basically just to define the shape of the head a bit more. I'll explain what I mean when I do that more. Okay, I'm going to grab down for the bottom here. It's got this yellow down here that I really like. Actually, I'm going to grab some cadmium yellow medium for that. And put some of that in down here. Again, we've got some sepia here just for the edges. If we just put on another big blob of paint and don't change the value or lights and darks anywhere, then it's just going to look like another blob of paint, which we don't want that, do we? No, we don't. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what about these areas like everywhere else? We could do the other areas there. We've got this we've got some darker colors there. So what'll happen now is if we start to put those darker colors in, like we could, for example, attach this, another sepia line up here. But if we do it now and we come up here, it's going to bleed in. Now we want that brighter yellow color up in the top there. So we're going to leave that for now like that. You could use a finer brush, and with our wet paint we can flick up some into this fur here. You can go back and forth too if you want. Try to keep it, as loose as possible. You don't have to do this. You could easily just leave it like a nice soft round edge, like wash kind of thing. One thing up here is this does bleed a little bit more up there. So for that, I want to put some water up here and to make that area lighter. But if I put the water on the light part of the paint, then that dark paint, the brown color, is going to come this way. So I want to put the water just up here. I don't want to touch the dry area, which is the bluish area. And what I'm doing is, if you notice up in our painting, take a look at the painting, how that just very softly dissipates. So I don't have a lot of water on my brush. I'm just dabbing at the edge there. And if I want to, we've kind of got a lighter rim around here, so I can put in some clean water there. A little bit of a blossom cauliflower look. Another light area down here. There we go. Now I did say we were going to fix this head up here, so I'm just going to push this ever so carefully. I'm just trying to keep the water off of the blue part. So we can see here our little section that we put on is dry. I like how it looks. I may want to lighten this area in the head up a bit later, but other than that, it looks good. We don't want to put too many layers on, and we don't want to overwork our painting. Really important things to keep in mind. So let's move on to our little tail section here. So we'll start with the lightest color, or the lighter color there, which is yellowy color. We're going to use, I'm using natural sienna. You can use you can use yellow ochre, raw umber. They're all kind of a yellowy color. You could use cadmium yellow medium or a medium yellow and just add a little bit of burnt umber in it. It's just a matter of getting the right kind of yellowy color. I don't like to dwell too much on the paints. I think paint manufacturers make way too many colors. People feel they need to run out and buy every one under the sun. Okay, so remember we got a light area under there, so let's leave that. I might have gone a bit too close there, but that's okay. Very simple. Just going to make that shape in there, this little kind of U shape that's there. All right. Don't want to overdo it too much. Okay. Now we don't want a lot of water on this, but we're going to grab some of that. I think we used sepia before. We'll use sepia again. There, yep, nice dark color. And we'll come along the edge here and throw some of that in. You can see here how that's dried there before, and that'll give you an idea of how that's going to dry there. Paying attention to how your paint dries is probably one of the most valuable lessons you can do for yourself in watercolor painting. Was for me anyways. I don't like how even that is. It's a bit lighter up here. So I'm just going to plop some clean water in there. It'll make a blossom kind of thing, or whatever you want to call it. There we go. Just breaking that up a bit. Yeah, this is more of a straight line. There. I'm just making sure that meets up there. Although, again, it's a bit lighter up in here. And so let's say you did do this. You put in your paint here, and it's lighter in the original. Really, again, if the bird were to twist or turn, everything would look completely different. So it's not a matter of, having the eye in the right place, the beak in the right place. Those are the things that matter, and those are the things that are going to, define your painting, and whether or not it looks like an English robin, which is what we're painting here today. Not so much whether or not you have exactly the right light spot in exactly the right area. So if you catch something like this and you think, hey, you know what? I kind of like how that's light in the original. I'm going to fix that in mine. By all means, go ahead. But if you don't, not the end of the world. Definitely not a reason to throw away your painting or start over again. I want to get some really nice deep dark values in here, so I'm grabbing some more sepia. You might want to wait until it's a bit drier for this. For example, there's a line that goes along here, and then there's a darker spot up here. There we go. So if we stop at the end there when it's wet, everything kind of bleeds out. But if we do it when it's too dry, well, then it doesn't blend. So it's all timing. Okay, I don't want to mess with that too much more. I kind of like how it looks in there. Now we've got another shape in here that looks like we've either made our body too big, quite possible, or left that part out. So let's grab some. I'm gonna try and use just some dark paint here for this part. I just got straight up sepia. I'm just scraping this along there. No, I think that was the right thing to do. All right, I'm gonna grab some of that Payne's gray that I had. I'm going to add in some darker values up here. One of the things about when you're putting a big wash on and taking off the lines there, that's the kind of thing that can happen. I'm not worried about it. Okay, so we'll darken this area up in here a little bit. I got some Payne's gray left on my brush. I'm adding that in. Okay. Kind of goes like that, I think. Now we want that to blend a bit. I don't want a really hard line there. So I just cleaned off my brush. Some water. I'm just dabbing it along the edge there. Perfect. I think there was some yellowy color under here a little bit. We'll add some of that in. I don't want our bird thinking we mess with them too much or change too many things. There we go. I don't like that line I made in there. This one's sticking out. Let's see if I can't get rid of it. If I can, oh well. There we go. That's better. Just blur that a bit. Just soften that up. I think we need to bring our underbody this way a bit more. Okay. We'll leave that alone for now. Okay, now we've got this other big color in there, the orange. A whole lot of orange. I'm going to clean off my palette for this one. And clean off the brush. And we're going to grab some orange. Again, I think this is a cadmium yellow orange. Or something like that. We've got lots of yellow, we got lots of orange in there. So we'll start with I think what we'll do is we're going to start with the lighter yellowy color. Contaminated my paint there, but whatever. Okay. Come on, yellow. Show me the yellow. All right, good enough. Okay, so now I'm going to come around here and I'm just going to start putting some paint on. I'm going to go around, put a line around the eye there. I'm going to try and avoid hitting that if I can. And try and keep this shape that I've got there. An eyeball over on this side that I want to be aware of. Just filling in. I've got a fair bit of water on here, so I've got some time before anything dries, so I can use some, make some adjustments if need be. which, oh, I'm sure there will be. Always something. That area under there is a bit darker, but we will tend to that later. Also, we want to make sure that what we need to do with this is just get it on. We'll dab out a few areas there that we put on, but for the most part, leave a little patch of that bluey color there. Okay. Now let's just take a look up here. I think our guy here has a bit more. I'm going to just try and bleed this out with some clean water there. Yeah, there we go. Not too much. Now I've gone and lost my little blue edge there. There we go. Now I got it back. Okay, so now we've got some lighter areas up here that kind of come around the eye a bit. Okay, so I'm gonna basically just dab out some of this while it's still wet. You do this two ways. You can do it when it's wet and then more so when it dries. This in here is important because this defines where that the beak comes from, and that'll be done with making it darker underneath, but also keeping it lighter on top. That's this little line right here. You can see it in the original. So just use some clean water in there. We could have done it the same way we did the other one. So I mean, we could have done like basically put a really light layer underneath. That might have been a better way to do it. But this is how I've done it. So by all means, if you want to switch it up, feel free. What I mean by that is if we actually painted the bottom this color and then added the darks on, similar to what we did over top of the blue there. But for now, we're going to do it this way. I like the effect that putting the water in makes, like with the blossoms and things like that. What I mean by a blossom is like where the water pushes the pigment out. Big fan of the blossoms. It gives a lot of, it basically, when we look at this bird, it's not a solid color. There's lots going on there. And so we want to make sure, we don't end up with just a big solid blob of color there. So our darker areas, I think we're going to let this dry and then we'll mix those in later. I might, now that I just said that, I just grabbed some sepia, because that was the color that we were using. And I'm going to, because this is a kind of like a blurry, it's not like a solid dark color there. So what I'm saying is, if we look at the bottom of the bird, it kind of bleeds in a lot more, like the colors bleed a lot more. So we don't necessarily want to have, we want them to, kind of flow out in some of these areas here. So I'm just dabbing in a darker color that will mix and blend with, oops, there's that area there that I just wanted to make light and I just put the darker color in it. Way to go, Paul. I'm using just a dry brush there to keep that out. And it also kind of curves around like that. Just lifting out as much as I can. So that's going to make a big difference in our painting if we don't otherwise. Same thing up here. That's what so the one thing with putting the paint in like that when it's wet is that it spreads. It's not biased as to the direction that it'll go in. It just goes where it wants to go. So I'm going to reclaim some of these areas here while I'm at it. There. I don't want to overwork my painting too much. That's really important. Because it does look, you know, it's very obvious when a painting's been overworked. Again, that is another reason why it's just easier just to paint from light to dark versus doing it this way, which is much more complicated. Now down here, the darkest it can, you know, as long as we don't put any water on the white side of the paper, it's not going to get any, it's only going to spread up. So in that sense, it only has one direction to go, so that's fine. Whereas up here, if I put this up here like I had it, it'll spread up into the area that's light, which I should have been more aware of. But there's a lot of variables. I'm trying to talk. I like to give myself a break. Don't be so hard on myself. Yeah, I think we'll leave that. This up here I think got a bit dry, so I'm just dabbing around the edge there. Same thing down here. Just want those to bleed in together. Okay. Just excess paint there. Okay, so you can see how our painting is dried there. You can see now probably clear where we dabbed out those lighter areas. Our dark area kind of bled around a bit. We definitely need some more vibrant orange and darker orange. So we're going to do one more layer. And we'll focus on these areas where the orange is a bit brighter and a bit darker. And that should wrap it up for that section. So let's start with, I don't know, we'll start with the brighters. Okay. So one thing that we'll notice is that in the painting, these colors and brighter areas, they definitely don't just, you know, appear like I'm putting them on here. They're more gradual, like they're very subtle, some of the color shifts and changes. So I'm putting on this little areas here with lots of water. So I'm just probably putting this all the way down here, except for that area down there. And then we can, now we'll grab some of that darker color that we mixed up earlier, which was the orange and sepia. And we're just doing our best to get that where it needs to go. We're going to come back to the little areas there up above. Right now I just want to make sure I get the right value. And depending on how much water you have, you may have to come back and kind of hit this again and do it again, and that's okay. Okay, there we go. We'll leave that like that. Now let's, on a cleaner brush, I'm just going to come along with a damp brush, and I'm just dabbing some of these areas here to eliminate as much of that hard edge as I can. So I don't paint like this. I'm moving my out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing. Just touching those edges so they soften up. Okay, now I'll try and focus on getting darker color in some of these areas here. And the paint is still wet. There we go. And at the same time, while it's still wet, I'm going to grab some of this vibrant bright orange, and I'm going to dab it back in. So it's going to spread out, move around, hopefully give us the effect that we want. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Generally, knowing how your paint dries and when, what stage to sort of attack your painting, those are like the secrets. And they're not secrets, they're things that you practice and that you learn as you go on. So, and also it's a discipline thing, because what I mean by that is it's very easy to say, make sure your paint is dry before you do this, or put this on at exactly the right time. Because I find myself, I know better, and I'll still be like, oh, I'm just gonna try it and see, and then I end up with the same result as I always get, which is generally, when that happens, it's a mess. But don't be hard on yourself. Like, just understand that's human nature to want to fix things and make them better. And often when we do so, we end up making them worse. But whatever, it's all good. But learning those things, like when to put your paint on, how dry is the painting and whatnot, those things are pretty key. All right. For the eye, I'm going to use, let's go with burnt umber. I have a reddy brown color, that looks good. And we'll start with that. And we'll go along the bottom here. There is some, if you look very closely in the eyeball, it is brown on the bottom. Don't worry so much about exactly where you've got your paint and where you don't. So we're going to try and use our brush as dry as possible, because we don't want this color to bleed in so much to the brown. Like, we want it to bleed in, but we don't want it to like take over. So we want it to blend. I'm going to leave a little highlight area. I always end up starting a little too high. There we go. So our brown, and now on the bottom we've got some more dark. I don't know that I put the highlight in the right area. I might fill that in and go over it with a gouache or something after. Just take your time and be patient with this part. It is a pretty critical step, the eyeball. Yeah, I don't like how that's pointing down. Whoops, just put my hand in the wet paint there. There's another eyeball over here. Just a little hint of something there. We're going to have to fill that area in around it. Now, if I start dabbing in around the beak, that's going to kind of make the colors, they'll bleed into the orange, and I don't want that. So, yeah, this brown here and this black are not working, so I'm just going to kind of, there we go. There just wasn't enough, and that, I'm going to fill in that area there, and I'm going to add it in after. I just didn't like where the placement was of that. Generally I get it right, but if I start up way here, it looks like the bird is, like, where you put that, it looked like the bird was, where I put it, sorry, the bird was staring like way up in the air instead of making contact with the viewer. I'm going to make sure my brush is nice and clean. And I'm just going to fill in that white area there a little bit. Be careful you don't grab your And that eye is not the right shape. I don't like it anyway, so. Be careful when you're doing that you're not grabbing some of the blue and running it into your orange down there. Now the head has a little bit of a definition around it here. I've just got a bit of paint left on, so I'm just very lightly doing that. Okay, now let's let this second layer of orange here dry. We'll come back and we're going to do the beak. Okay, welcome back. We're going to start with the beak. So with our beak, we're going to get, I'm going to wet this a bit more. We're going to go back to our indigo. And you'll notice that it's got some dark areas around and then a light area in the center. So we're going to basically start by painting in these dark areas, sorry. Forget about the light area for now, just paint in the dark areas. Try to use as little paint as possible and the finest point brush that you have available. Keep that as dark as possible. Indigo is a very almost black blue. I mean, it's blue. The more water you add to it, the more blue it is. But it's a very deep value pigment. That is something I use quite often. In fact, you'll probably see it in almost every one of my paintings. Especially for things like the eyes and stuff like that. There. Okay, so you probably might be thinking, wow, well, there's a lot more paint on that beak than that, Paul. What are you doing? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the colors that we put down and pull them into the beak. But first, our beak extends, like it does on all birds, further back. And this is something that I end up doing quite a bit, as I always miss this spot in here. So I'm just trying to, I probably shouldn't be going in that direction, because I'm trying to push the orange away. I doubt we'll make much progress, but I just want to make sure that I get kind of, and it goes down. We'll leave it for now. I'm not going to mess about with that. Okay, so now I'm just going to get some clean water. Not too much, just, and now I'm going up to those areas and I'm just going up and barely touching them. And you can see we're getting pretty much the color that we want on our beak. Now there's a few lines that come down there. There we go. I'm very happy with the beak other than that one spot there. But nothing we can do about that now. Well, actually there is. I will grab my gouache. And fill it in. Oh, is that cheating? Nope. That's making my painting look as best as I possibly can. And that's all I want. And most artists will use gouache and things like that in some way, shape, or form, or masking fluid. I personally just don't like masking fluid, so I've got my handy tube of well-used and abused gouache here. And so the area that I'm mostly concerned about is that highlight area at the top of the beak. So gouache is like an opaque watercolor paint. It's essentially watercolor paint that has talc added into it, or different types have different mediums added into it. There we go. I'm just went over top of the areas that where the orange was to bring that beak out. Actually came out quite well. Don't overwork it. Now we could, this time, we can do the eye as well. Put that dot in where we want it. I think right there is good. Start off small. There. Much better. Looking right at you. We want to give some definition here. So we look at he's got, like, there's a dark ring that kind of comes around and that defines that lighter area above there. A bit more shape in here we need, and a bit more over here maybe. And then we can use the same, basically what we're going to use is we're going to use some of that browny orange color that we mixed up. I just barely light brush, damp brush. And now I can add these in. I'm almost like, you see how I'm putting this on? I'm almost sketching it on, building it up. And that way it blends easily and I'm not pushing the underneath pigments around. If I add a whole bunch of water and try to do it light, you know, that's generally how we apply our watercolor paint. When we want to lighten it, is we add more water. But if I do that, well, then that's going to push around some of the pigments underneath. So for this, we're going to keep our paint as our brush as dry as possible. Now that we're into the finer details, I'm just building it up. Now it's very yellow, like a bright yellow underneath there. So I'm going to try and grab, again, very dry brush. I've grabbed some, this is like a cadmium yellow light. And I'm going to put some of that around the eye here. Hopefully it takes the city of it. So again, going over the painting here, we started with our light layer. So we had 2 layers here, we had 2 layers here, essentially 1 layer down here, except for the blue underneath. We had 2 layers here on the chest, and we had 2 layers on the head, 1 layer on the beak. We rescued our eye, so to speak, but I'm happy with it overall.